Dennis, we beginnen vandaag even anders dan anders. Want het is er weer tijd voor. Er is weer een beste whisky van de wereld.
Een beste whisky van de wereld.
Whisky van de wereld. Niet dat ik dat vind, hè, want ik vind ook wel eens iets de beste van de hele wereld. Maar de World Whisky Awards Single Malt World Best. Daar wil ik het vandaag eens eventjes goed over hebben.
En dat schenk jij mij net in.
Schenk ik je nu in.
Wauw.
De Glenallachie 12 of zoiets.
Nou ja, als je er een paar slokjes van hebt, dan wordt je uitspraak nog beter. Maar begreep ik nou dat wij ook nog eens een keer een legende uit de whiskywereld erover kunnen gaan spreken?
Zeker. 50 jaar heeft iemand ervaring opgedaan om vervolgens deze beste whisky aan ons te mogen presenteren. Dus wij gaan bellen. Wij gaan een live interview doen met Billy Walker. En hij gaat ons hier alles over vertellen. Wauw. Ik zeg start maar in.
Dit is Drop or Dram, de podcast voor whiskyliefhebbers. Van beginner tot kenner. Schenk je favoriete glas in en geniet met ons mee.
Ja, je hoorde het er net al in de introductie, maar vandaag wordt best wel weer een mooie speciale uitzending. Want we gaan een live conversatie houden met een van de legendes uit de whiskywereld, Billy Walker. Ook wel de whisky revivalist genoemd. We kennen hem van diverse merken. Hij zit nu bij Glenallachie of Glenallachie. Dat moeten we hem dadelijk ook eventjes vragen, Dennis. Maar hoe dan ook, we hebben een live verbinding. En het komende uur zullen we hem dan ook helemaal het hemd van het lijf gaan vragen.
Ja, ik denk dat dit ook een uitzending wordt die wat langer gaat duren dan dat jullie van ons gewend zijn. Want ja, hoe vaak heb je gewoon live een legende aan de lijn?
Nou ja, ook dat zijn de mensen wel weer van ons gewend. Dus dat komt helemaal goed.
Dat komt. Dus wij kunnen hem zien. Ja, het blijft een podcast. Wij hebben hem live verbinding met Schotland. De Speyside. Billy Walker on the other side of the line. Billy Walker, legend of the whisky world. Thank you very, very much to take your time and welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, a pleasure. More than a pleasure. Where do we start with a legend like that?
Yeah, very simple, I think. We are a podcast from beginner to experts. Mr. Walker, I've got a very well-known bottle here by you. But my first question is it the Glenallachie or the Glenallachie, or how do you pronounce it? Because in Holland we are used to all kind of pronunciations, but the Scotch are almost always a bit difficult for us.
I would have thought the Dutch were pretty good at Scotch. It's pronounced Glenallachie.
Glenallachie.
Well, we've got the bottle to show it, and it's a special bottle because, to kick it off right away, World Whisky Awards winner, single malts best. Makes you probably very, very proud after 50 years in the industry.
Actually, yeah, listen, it's a great award. It's a team effort. But interestingly, it's the second time we've won this award in 4 years. The Glenallachie 10-year-old cask strength won it 4 years ago. So I suppose we can say we're maybe doing something right in terms of quality management.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, like you said, your second award in a very young time, but because if we take it back, you've been in the industry as a legend, we said, for 50 years. Can you take us a little bit back as who is Billy Walker and why he became a legend? Hard to tell about yourself, but we'll say that.
Yeah, listen, I've been in the industry, I think, for 52 years. I was brought up in a whiskey town, the whiskey town of the Boston, which was certainly the spiritual home and the operational home of Hiram Walker, who were the owners of Ballantyne's Whisky, and also it was the home of G&B bottling plant. They were We were not far away from Loch Lomond distillers or Auchentoshan distillers. So it was a real whisky area. And it wasn't, although I came from a whisky town, I studied chemistry at Glasgow University. I spent the first 4 years actually working for a Dutch company called Organon as a pharmaceutical research chemist. But there was an inevitability that I would end up initially working with Highland Walker and Ballantyne's, and that was a fantastic experience. And it was a different world then. Whisky was indeed a different world. It was a world that was almost completely dominated by blended Scotch whisky. So a lot of the work we did in the technical side and the blend side was driven by the success of the blended side of the business. But the company owned some very interesting distilleries like Milton Duff and Burgay. Like even these days, we owned the distillery and quite a few others. And Ballantyne's Highland Walker was a fantastic learning experience. They gave me almost a free hand to be involved in almost every aspect of the business. And I was there for about 5 years, and for whatever reason, I decided that I might try fermenting penicillin for 2 or 3 years. And I actually did that with Beecham's. But I found it very boring, and then Inverhouse Distillers came calling they asked me if I would become the master blender, and I was there for 7 years. Great period. You know, it was a exciting company. We had a huge grain distillery, Glenallachie, and we had on site, we had Glenflagler malt whisky distillery. The freedom to do things there was amazing, and it was a great atmosphere. I was there for 7 years, and I have to say it was probably, in terms of challenge and excitement, maybe the best 7 years I've had in this industry. But things changed, and I was encouraged to join a company called Burns Stewart, who were a very, very small company. At that point, didn't have any distillers. They were a blending house. And that was fun. It was a very creative period. And then the opportunity to buy that company with a few other people came available. And that was the start of another quite interesting journey. We acquired the business, and very quickly we acquired Deze Distillery, which had been closed, mothballed for about 7 or 8 years. Previously had been in the ownership of Invergordon Distillers. And that was also a terrific time to recommission the distillery, to get it working again, to create the style of Deanson that we were looking for. And then very quickly, we also acquired Tobermory Distillery, an island distillery that frankly had been, in my opinion, had been left neglected for a long, long time. And in fact, it had been silent for many years. We didn't recommission it, but we bought it just as it was being recommissioned. And that was fun. Great fun creating the personality of that distillery, deciding what the structure of the new fill would be, what kind of wood management we want to introduce. And then, unfortunately, the company was acquired by Angostura, which meant essentially that I had no interest in continuing. But it was a good moment in the sense that I had managed to generate some cash. This was in 2003, and at that time, the industry it wasn't as buoyant as it's been over the last 20 years. There was something like maybe 10, 15 malt distilleries had been they were silent, or they had been mothballed. And along with a couple of very interesting South African partners, we approached Chivas about acquiring a malt distillery. And we ended up acquiring Ben Riech, which again was an opportunity to recommission, to create, to define what the structure of the new fill would be going on. And more importantly, and most importantly, to understand that the inventory we had acquired, what the personality was, what style of wood it was currently maturing in, and what style of wood we could see the future for launching Glenallachie as a single malt in its own right. And I have to say, that was a great time. I mean, Glenallachie was a wonderful acquisition, lovely distillery, right size, had its own floor maltings, which had not been used for a long time. And it was fun bringing that back into life and doing our own malting. And very quickly, we got a call from Chivas Pernod asking if we'd be interested in acquiring Glenallachie. And interestingly, Glenallachie was a big part of historically of the William Teacher company. And when I was with Ballantyne's, we were very familiar with Glenallachie, but it came with some caveats. It had been closed. It had silent period for about 6 years. So managing the inventory to accommodate and manage and resolve a gap of 6 years was quite difficult. But again, it was understanding what was the style of the whiskey we had inherited. How did we want to define the structure of the new fill at Glenallachie, and what style of casks would be appropriate to the vision that we had for Glenallachie going forward. And it was a great story. Glenallachie, actually, I think we did a really good job with Glenallachie. And in 2013, we were persuaded, I was persuaded, 2010, I think it's 10, we had the opportunity to acquire Glenallachie. Beautiful location, a distillery that had been neglected for quite a long time. And again, it was a challenge of redefining who Glenallachie was, where we wanted it to be, how we wanted to structure the new fill, what was the pattern, what was the important part of what style of wood we wanted to mature in. And I have to say, we had a lot of fun at Glenallachie. And then, of course, all that kind of came to a shuddering end when when my partners decided that they would quite like to sell, and Brown-Forman came along and made an offer that was acceptable to all of the members of the team. And it was a big vote. It was kind of, really don't want to do this, but it was appropriate for my fellow partners that we should do it. And then within a year, I got a call from Chivas asking if I might be interested in acquiring the Glenallachie distillery. And I knew Glenallachie extremely well. I knew the style of whiskey. And what a terrific opportunity. A wonderful location, tucked away just under Ben Rennes. Distillery, big distillery, 4 million litres. So yeah, we'll definitely acquire the distillery. And it was the start of another quite intense, might even say incredible journey over the last 8 years. But the challenges in acquiring the distillery are always about understanding the style and the quality of the inventory you've inherited. What kind of casks is the whiskey maturing in? And then actually trying to define the personality of Glenallachie that you want to create going forward. And that means understanding what kind of structure, what kind of profile do you want for the new fill spirit? And how, in fact, do you seamlessly engage the historical whiskey that we have inherited with the new style of whiskey, or the style of whiskey that we want to create going forward? And what kind of what style of wood management, what style of casks do we want to use to create this personality? And if I'm being honest, it's taken us about 8 years to get to this point in actually taking the inherited, acquired inventory and transferring them into the style of casks we are looking to use. And so they are compatible with the new whiskey that we're making. And yeah, it's taken us 8 years to achieve that point. But I think we can say comfortably we have reached an equilibrium now.
Let me give a short recap in Dutch. Dus wij vroegen Billy Walker eventjes naar 50 jaar ervaring in de whiskywereld. Opgegroeid in een plek waar whisky eigenlijk alom vertegenwoordigd was. Hè, met de uitzicht op Ballantyne's, J&B, Loch Lomond. Werd hij eerst chemicus van beroep en heeft hij nog gewerkt voor een Nederlandse organon. Maar zoals hij zelf zei, ja, op een gegeven moment was ik wel klaar met het fermenteren van penicilline. En toen dacht ik wil me wat meer storten op het fermenteren van graan. En toen is hij de whiskywereld ingekomen. Niet veel later kreeg hij de kans om eigenaar te worden samen met een paar anderen van diensten. En nog wat later Tobermory. Dat hebben ze samen weer op de kaart gezet, verkocht. En zo begon een lange reis via Ben Riach, waar een nieuwe persoonlijkheid aangegeven moest worden. Via Glendronach, Glenglassaugh en uiteindelijk in 2017 bij Glenallachie. Dennis.
Wauw. Ja, dat is wel echt een reis waar vele mensen van dromen. Yes, Billy, coming back to you. It's quite a journey you made. And with all those distillery names, like it seems like whiskey distillers seem to drop in your lap by any chance. But there's so many beautiful old names like Glendronach, Ben Riach, and even Glenallachie is a well-known name nowadays. But it used to be just for blending. It's quite a new distillery on the single malt market, isn't it?
Look, frankly, the reality is that almost every distillery 30 or 40 years ago, every malt distillery essentially was a vehicle for supplying malt whiskey for blended whiskey. The kind of emergence of single malt, I think, other than the big four, let's say Glenlivet, maybe Glenmorangie, these were important players for a long period of time, and of course they still are. But you know, the kind of lesser known distilleries, it's only since 2004 that an opportunity for single malt to become part of the greater whiskey world actually began to emerge. And I mean, thankfully, over the last 20 years, you can see that the single malt business is started to grow significantly. It's still a relatively small part of the Scotch whiskey world. I think it represents something like 15 to 17% in terms of sales, but it's growing. And in the process of growing, it has stimulated the interest in so many different countries and with so many different participants. It's been a really exciting, this last 20 years for single malt has been really, really exciting time.
Yeah, and like you said, it's acquiring a distillery is not that difficult nowadays. If you've got the money, you can buy anything in the world that you like. But you were also saying something very interesting, and I think that brings us back to where you are now in the world, is understanding the stock, the casks, the wood management, new styles, bringing it together in, well, what used to be an established brand or an established whiskey. If you look at Glenallachie, you stayed independent. You had your own views with all the experience you had in the past by blending, by everything else. That makes it so interesting. So it's not only the management part. It's more about taking a look at the real history of the whiskey itself. It's all about the flavor, and that's what you do.
Yeah, look, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say at the point when you asked the question, look, Glenallachie was a great opportunity, but it represented everything that was right for us. It had never really been exposed as a brand to the marketplace, so there was no negative and no positive. It was a blank sheet and we had allowed to paint our own pictures. Having said that, I was quite familiar with the whiskey from a blending point of view. It was a classical Speyside. Location-wise was beautiful. Availability of water, well, there were two private reservoirs that were collecting water from Benrinnes. And that's very important, of course. And it was a big distillery, maybe too big for us. So our primary first thing we wanted to do with Glenallachie was to truncate the volume that was produced. So essentially, we're now operating one shift per day, and we only operate 5 days a week in terms of people on the site. And that has allowed us to move to long fermentation. And that's always been a particular challenge in me, is I always wanted to have a distillery that had the capacity and the time to do long fermentation, and now we're fermenting somewhere like 140 to 180 hours. And there are many reasons for doing that, both from a blender's point of view and from a chemist's point of view. But the distillery was wonderful. The inventory we acquired was terrific inventory over a long aging period. Even next year, I think we will have, or certainly for the next 3 years, we'll have a 50-year-old available. And the actual proposition to buy a mature distillery with mature whiskey is so much easier financially than actually building a new distillery, and you have to wait patiently until the whiskey matures to a particular age. With an operational distillery, you have an opportunity to bring the product to the market much quicker. But there are many challenges, not least of which is getting a very deep and full understanding of the mature inventory, what its shape and form is, structure, flavour profile, and how you want to make that compatible with what you're about to introduce. That meant essentially that we had to look at, we inherited something like 70 or 80,000 casks, so we had to look individually every one of these casks, understand the profile, recognise what was happening, what each of these various casks, different styles of casks, were delivering, and what did we want to do with it? Did we want to relocate it, re-rack it into a different style of cask? And yes, we've done a lot of that. And as I said earlier, it's taken us 8 years, to achieve the kind of quality position that we had our ambitions to achieve.
And doing that analysis on the inventory, what were the biggest or the most pleasant surprises you occurred?
Listen, we weren't. We never had any doubt about the quality we were inheriting. Good people, good blenders at Chivas, and a distillery that had been particularly well looked after from a management point of view. But we wanted to create Glenallachie as a defined and recognised sherry style of whiskey. So there's quite a lot of taking from fresh American barrels and into sherry casks, so Yanks, Oro, and indeed virgin oak casks and some red wine casks, to create and capture the kind of flavour profile that we had an ambition to achieve.
And is that the hand of the master that you think we have a Glenallachie that's not very sherry-like, but we think that the future is more sherry-flavoured whiskey?
Oh, certainly my ambition was to create Glenallachie as a sherry-style whiskey. And so we define the structure, the profile, the chemical profile of new spirit to be muscular enough to actually live and behave well in these very richly flavoured casks like PX, Oro, American virgin oak, some red wine casks. And we're trying to capture different styles of flavour from these casks all the time. The PX is going to give us Christmas cake. It's going to give us dates and figs. The Oro, it's going to give us dark chocolate. It's going to give us mocha. The virgin oak is going to give us butterscotch, vanilla, honey, spices, nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon. And the red wine, we included a small amount of red wine in the formulation just to enhance the mouthfeel and just a little hint of tannin.
But
So,
now I'm getting curious because I want to take a little dive inside your head. You are acquiring a distillery. You know the whiskey already, but you see some potentials that others perhaps don't, or you want to steer it in a new direction. How does that work? Do you sit down with a few people at a kitchen table with a few drams, or how does it work that you decide this is the best way to go?
That's quite a difficult question, but I suppose in many ways, when I stole the previous companies, there was in my mind a lot of unfinished business in relation to the management, particularly management of sherry casks, and it was perhaps it was an obsession that when we acquired Glenallachie, that I was determined that the personality and the DNA that we bring to the market would have a significant sherry influence in the flavour profile.
Is that what they said, typically old Speyside style? Because if you take sherry and the softness and the thing, I certainly say, especially being situated in the Speyside, I think Macallan, the old Glenrodders, the old Glenlivets, all the big Speysides in the heavily sherried 80s. But you're also taking it to a new level with red wine casks and virgin oaks.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that's really important for a company like ourselves or a blender like myself is that we are not constrained by history. There's no history that's saying you have to follow this path.
You can make your own history.
We make our own history, and we have the freedom to create and be imaginative. And that's that freedom. I think our strategy essential is that we don't pursue consistency; we pursue perfection. So we're not constrained by having a historical brand that is got to have consistency all the time, and that's how brands are. Our objective in life is that every batch of 12, 15 or 18 that we make should be better than the last one we made. And that is constantly our ambition. That's why that we spend so much time in the lab and in the warehouse becoming familiar with and understanding what is happening in cask. Are these ready or should they be left? Did we go to the next stage with these guys? Are they ready now? Whatever. It's listen, quality is a bit of an obsession, and but as a private company and as a free spirit, we have the freedom to do these things, and it allows you to be as creative as you want to be.
And it shows because you got a new award, and we've got the bottle open here. So crack it open, Jan. Just pour us a little dram because we have the 12-year-old, and it's a shame talking about beautiful drams like that. And the independence, and also the future of whiskey. But Jan is pouring us a bottle, and Billy is doing the same on the other side with a different bottle, of course, because he's quite far away. 12-year-old, yeah. On the nose, it's like you said, the sherry notes, the nuttiness, the bold flavors, the wood. This is what people probably think if you say, what does whiskey smell and taste like? This is something that people refer to. This is what they're stuck in their mind. It's, but with a different edge.
Well, I think our generation is Dennis, but perhaps the newer generation is a little bit new to this taste because it also feels like a taste from earlier days. It's very spicy. You don't see that often anymore.
Ja, we zitten nu inmiddels aan de Glenallachie 12-year-old. Gekozen vorig jaar in 2025 World Whisky Awards. World's Best Whisky. Dus we zitten met niet voor niks zomaar te drinken. Maar wauw.
At this moment, the best whiskey in the world, Dennis.
Ja. Wauw. Ja. This, I get your point of view, like what you said before. Understanding the whiskey, it's so difficult. Every cask is on its own. Not pursuing a history, but pursuing perfection in your mind, and with the legend you are, and with all the whiskies you've seen in around the world, you know probably best what people would like.
Oh, we hope so. I would like to
Wow,
think.
Yeah, you hope so. It's a well-established brand at the moment. It's
Yeah, but it's also the case. It's also the case that we not just about defining who we are, but we also are we choose our partners, our importer distributors, very carefully. We want to work with people who are genuinely have an interest in the whiskey experience and in the brand, and they become ambassadors, and indeed the customers of the imported distributors, they also become ambassadors. And we try to create a connection that is all about the whiskey. And we should make the point that we only bottle at 46% or above. The reason for that is we don't want to chill filter. So at 46%, even in a very cold climate or in a refrigerator, the whiskey will stay stable. It will not throw a haze or a precipitate. So it's 46% or indeed higher, 40, sometimes above 50, sometimes cask strength. So we retain all of the intrinsic natural flavour that's present in the whiskey coming from the cask.
Wow. Well, it's a very deep, rich flavor. This makes me happy. Jan. This makes me very, very happy. Well,
A lot of
whiskey makes me happy, but as I say, we're making a podcast, and you can't see, but as Billy Walker is appearing on a screen, not only with a glass in his hand, but when he's talking about the history and his journey in the whiskey world, I see that smile coming bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like you said, it is an obsession, but also a passion, and it's not only a businessman making whiskey, like you said several times before. It's understanding the stock, it's understanding the wood. It is about the whiskey. It's not about the business. Okay, here and there, but taking it a little bit further, because we'll come back to this beautiful dram and whiskey in a while. But taking whiskeys to a different place, you also revitalized two other one other brand, White Heather, which was a long lost soul, so to speak, and you also created another whiskey from the distillery, the Meikle Toir, I must say, as a peated whiskey. That is interesting. Long lost soul and a new peated style.
Look, the White Heather blended whiskey, for I think for most blenders, working with blended whiskey is always interesting because it gives you a certain freedom to use the whiskey from other distilleries. And White Heather was a very important part of the acquisition. And part of the discussion was that if the deal was to go through, we really wanted White Heather because it had been a really important blended whiskey for a long period of time. But when Chivas Pernod acquired the Chivas brand and Ballantine's, it was probably found itself being relatively less important than it had the journey it had previously enjoyed. So getting a hold of White Heather was really important, and we've done a lot of work on it in the sense that we realised that no point in being 12, 8 or younger. We had to be in the older 15, 21 category, where we knew that the whiskies that were available, we could really gather together and express them as some very, very interesting experience. Listen, the journey for White Heather has really just started. We are confident and optimistic that this will continue to grow. But as you know, blending whiskey is not as easy as it used to be, and single malt whiskey is certainly making the challenge for blending whiskey quite difficult. But from a blender's point of view, working with other people's and creating a blend is, it's exciting. The journey has really just started with White Heather, and we will continue that. On the other brand you mentioned, Meikle Toir, why did we want to do a peated Speyside? It's a good question, and there's a couple of kind of real reasons for it. The first one is that we tried something similar at Glenallachie, but we didn't really get enough time to fulfill our ambition for it. So it was a bit of a continuing itch on the skin that we wanted to do something. We also wanted to differentiate this. We wanted it to be quite different from a classical Islay peat. So we wanted to use mainland peat, which is essentially a peat that is non-medicinal. So if you have an Islay whiskey, you will pick up some of the carrière, some wonderful Islay whiskies, of course, but one of the really significant characteristics is that medicinal note you get from Islay peat. The mainland peat doesn't have that, and the reason is that the peat is formed from different sources. On the island, there are no trees, so you get a much more earthy type of medicinal type, probably coming from the kind of contribution from the seaweed, maybe iodine notes. On the mainland, the decomposition is mainly from heather and trees. So you get a much sweeter vanilla, butterscotch notes, along with the phenolic, smoky, tobacco leaf, leather notes. So we wanted to make something that differentiated itself quite clearly from Islay peat. And so the Meikle Toir journey started, and the conversation then was with the malts as to how much phenols we wanted to have absorbed into the malting barley. And then having done that, is in about 120 to 140 ppm of phenols in the barley, we then wanted to create an experience from the distillation that will give us phenols around about 30, 35 ppm. And in parallel, we decided that we might do a bit of a turbo. So we drilled right into the heart of the distillate where the phenols were residing, and we took a small cut that gave us a distillate with ppms around about 60 to 70 ppm of phenol. So we've done a lot of actually interesting, exciting cover work, enjoyable work with creating the Meikle Toir experience, then deciding what style of cask can best allow us to best express this peated experience that we wanted to showcase. And we launched a release that had been matured in Chinkopin oak casks, and just focusing on that particular one, Chinkopin, very interesting style of American oak. Characteristics are kind of herbal notes, anise, licorice. Blends beautifully with the mainland peated notes. And it's a style of the American virgin oak that I think it's essentially comes from Missouri area in the northeast, maybe the lower part of the Appalachians as well. But nice. It worked beautifully with peat. Conventional American oak works pretty well. It's a different experience. And we also did a sherry style, and peat and sherry are just the perfect match. So yeah, look, and that journey's just begun. And interestingly, we also wanted to launch it as a young peated expression, because the reality is, in the world of peated whiskey, if you want the fullest experience, you will get between 5 and 10 years. After that period, after that aging period, the influence of the peat begins to actually fade. Now, the whiskey doesn't become less good. There's other aspects of the maturation process that deliver additional notes but the peat bite begins to fade. So we wanted to bring a 5 to 10 year old to the market to get the full peated experience, the full bump.
Kijk, daarmee is een mooie vraag die we ook vaak krijgen meteen beantwoord. Waarom zijn gepiete whiskies vaak wat jonger? Billy Walker legt net uit dat hoe langer de whisky ligt, hoe meer de invloed van de turf, van de rook eigenlijk afneemt. Hij had het er net al over de vele creativiteiten die bij Glenallachie kwijt kan. Maar er is dus nog een hele familie van whiskies toegevoegd aan de Glenallachie distilleerderij. De White Heather, een oude bekende die weer nieuw leven wordt ingeblazen. Een blended Scotch whisky, omdat het blenden hem nog steeds in het bloed zit. Maar ook een hele nieuwe familie geturfde Speyside, Meikle Toir. Maar dan met name met die rooksmaken die je van de Islay kent. Een beetje dat medicinale. Wat de meeste geturfde Speyside niet hebben. Omdat het mainland turf dan weer wat minder medicinaal is, wat zoeter. Doordat daar meer hooi en bomen in zitten. Ja, Islay groeien geen bomen.
Nee, maar zij gebruikten dus de peat van de mainland. Dus niet van de Islay-stijl. Dus,
nee, maar ze willen wel een klein beetje die...
Ja, in de hoge ppm's. Maar niet zozeer de mainland peat die ze daarvoor gebruiken. Talking about the peated whiskies, like all Speysides in the very early days were also peated. Is that also some factor that you decided to make a peated style Speyside? Because you totally made a twist with Chinkapin oak and you made a modern twist of peated Speyside, so to say.
Yeah, look. I mean, historically, some of the older productions from the Speyside distillers would have a peat influence, but it is unlikely to have been. I think it's unlikely to have been a big peat influence. It would be a hint of peat. Certainly, in the old days, almost every distillery, malt whiskey distillery, would have been related to some kind of farming experience, and you'd be getting the barley from the farm. You would have probably have your own on-site maltings. And with your own on-site maltings, controlling the level of peat in the actual barley was a lot more difficult than it is commercially today. So maybe we are recreating some of what were historical experiences. But the driver really was to fulfill an ambition of creating a Speyside peated malt whiskey that differentiates itself totally and completely from the Irish style of peat.
Very, very interesting. But also taking the peat back to the casks. The main brand we're talking about, Glenallachie, the 12-year-old. You have a core range. You have. I also saw some of the wine casks, different wine casks, regional exclusives with different finishes. As the world of whiskey is progressing, you're making for the future. You're producing for the future. It's hard to predict the future. But what are the challenges? What is Glenallachie in 10 years' time? Where are you going, taste-wise? Then?
Well, I think we probably have established in stone the kind of taste profile that we'd want for the core range, and that's very much driven by capturing the sharing experience as it is today. My suspicion is that it will. Our ambition, of course, is that it's going to continuously get better and better, but probably by smaller increments because of the amount of work that we've done in the early days. So we don't really see Glenallachie moving too far from the kind of profile that we've created at the moment. But who knows? We are doing a lot of work on particularly on virgin oak casks from virtually all over the world. We're looking at Mongolia. We've got some wonderful casks from Mongolia. Japanese casks, Mizunara. We've created some very, very special experiences, so released some already. We're looking at oak from Colombia in South America in the Andes. We're looking at Guyana from the northwest corner of America, Ozark from the Ozark Plateau. We'd love to get some Swedish oak, and that's certainly. So we've got all kinds of experiences that are ticking along at the moment. Some of them are wonderful, and the challenge for me now is to how best to showcase these aligned with things like Oloroso casks, PX casks, even casks like Fino and Amontillado, doing a whole lot of work in the background that we will bring to the consumer at some point in time. The journey is not complete. There's so much happening in the background.
Yeah, and it's long term. It is long term. It's
very much long term. And the challenge is to understand how these casks are developing. Is it and capturing it at the sweet point? Is this the right time to bring it to use? And that's the big challenge for the blender or the blenders, is to know exactly at what point to capture this wonderful experience.
And just one question nog. We have now the 12-year-old and the 10-year-old won a few years ago the Best Whisky Award. You are now 8 years on the way. You've already told us that you lengthened the time of fermentation. So when your new style of Glenallachie is coming to the market, is that different from the 12 now, or will it be more or less the same as the one we have in bottle?
My suspicion, and maybe it's more than a suspicion, maybe it's a certainty, that the whiskey that we have produced will be a little bit more full-bodied than the whiskey we inherited. And that whiskey will have, in my opinion, a more balanced, a better relationship with the casks that it's maturing in than perhaps some of what we inherited. But that's not a reflection on what we inherited. What we inherited was wonderful. And we have worked with the acquired inventory to create the personality that we have today. But the next step, when we bring our own new fill to market, it will probably even have some, maybe even greater depth.
So in my humble words, the maker of the best whiskey in the world at the moment says, wait, stick with us because it will be better in the future.
Yeah.
That's certainly the objective.
Yeah. And
that's the ambition.
And if I look at the banner behind you, it said whiskey in good hands. And talking to Billy Walker, I think whiskey is in good hands. I must say so. Billy, what do we need to say more? Thank you very much for this exclusive, extensive insight on the world of whiskey, where it stands, used to be, where it is now, and where it's going into the future, and especially with classic whiskies like the Scotch single malts and Speysides, with beautiful revival. So we're very, very much looking forward to new whiskies from your hand, maybe even one or two new revivals in the future. You never know, but we'll see. We'll definitely see. But Jan.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. It was a great honor talking to you. Thanks for everything you learned us today, and we hope to taste a lot from you in the future. And we hope to see you at one of the occasions here in Holland or in Scotland.
Well, I think I'm going to be in Holland quite soon, I think. But look, guys, it's always great to talk to people who have got whiskey in their hearts. And it's a great subject. And it's endless. The journey continues. And we know, we're very confident that when we bring to the market what we've produced ourselves, there will be no disappointments.
Well, let's have a toast to that then. At your health and as you say, slange.
Proost, slange.
Dat was hem voor vandaag, lieve mensen. Wij zien elkaar de volgende keer weer. Tot dan. Dag. Dit was Drop or Dram. Vergeet niet om je te abonneren op onze podcast of kijk op onze website www.dropordram.nl. Tot de volgende keer.